On the edge of Union space, Admiral Laren stood at the command of the Vornak flagship, the Leviathan. His cold, calculating eyes surveyed the distant stars through the ship's vast viewport. Laren was no stranger to the sight of empires crumbling before him. His reputation for crushing resistance with precision and cruelty was well earned, and he had seen countless species submit without a fight. He expected nothing less from this day, another tribute run through the lesser territories of the galaxy. But there was one new variable in the equation: humanity. "Open communication channels," Laren ordered, his voice a controlled whisper of authority. His crew obeyed instantly, bringing the image of the Union representatives onto the screen. Standing in the center of the human delegation was Captain Daniel Morrow, a man whose expression was unshaken despite the power arrayed against him. Morrow was young, at least by the standards of the other species. His sharp eyes scanned the Vornak fleet, and while his heart raced with the pressure of the moment, he stood with the confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds before. The usual greetings were exchanged, each Union ambassador offering their allotted resources, all of them eager to avoid the wrath of the Vornak. Planets, minerals, starships. The offers piled up as each representative tried to outdo the last in their desperation to keep their worlds intact. Finally, it was humanity's turn. Admiral Laren leaned forward, intrigued. Humanity, though a recent member of the Union, had quickly made waves with their unconventional ways and their refusal to adhere strictly to the Union's cautious diplomacy. But the Vornak had no real expectations from them. They were, after all, just another species in the vast sea of life. Captain Morrow took a step forward, his hands behind his back, and addressed the Vornak admiral with a calm but firm tone. "Admiral Laren," Morrow began, meeting the Vornak's gaze through the view screen. "As the representative of Earth and the human colonies, I stand here to offer you nothing." A stunned silence fell across the bridge of the Leviathan. The other Union representatives shot Morrow horrified glances, their disbelief clear. No one denied the Vornak. No one, in all their years of dominance, had dared to say no outright. Laren's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened, narrowing as he focused solely on Morrow. "Perhaps your translator is malfunctioning," Laren replied, his voice laced with menace. "You may wish to reconsider." Morrow didn't flinch. "Our decision is final. Humanity will not bow to the Vornak. We will not offer you our resources, our planets, or our people. If you seek to take what is ours, you will find that we do not surrender." The tension in the air thickened as the Vornak crew shifted uncomfortably, awaiting Laren's command to obliterate the insolent humans. Laren, however, remained silent, his gaze locked on Morrow. The human's words were bold, and while most would have seen this as reckless, something in Laren recognized the spark of a challenge, one he hadn't encountered in far too long. He let the silence linger before he spoke again. "You realize what you are saying, Captain Morrow. You speak for your entire race." "I do," Morrow said, his voice unwavering. "Humanity will not be intimidated by your power. We know what you've done to other civilizations. But we are not like them. We will fight, even if the odds are against us." A slow smile crept across Laren's face, one of curiosity, not amusement. "Interesting," he murmured. "I've heard much about your species. You are new to the galactic stage, but you seem to have potential. You do understand that refusing me could lead to the destruction of your worlds." Morrow nodded. "We understand the risk, but if we give in now, we lose everything that makes us who we are. We're prepared to fight." Laren leaned back in his command chair, pondering the human's words. Most species saw the Vornak as nothing more than conquerors, but in truth, the Vornak sought something far greater than domination. They sought strength, worthy opponents, those who could meet them in battle and challenge their might. So far, no one had measured up, but perhaps, just perhaps, this young species might prove different. "Very well," Laren said finally, his voice a low rumble. "We will not destroy you today, Captain Morrow, but understand this. Our conflict is far from over. I will be watching humanity closely. You may yet prove yourselves worthy of facing the Vornak in true battle." Morrow nodded, his face set in grim determination. "We'll be ready." As the communication channel closed, Admiral Laren sat back in his chair, his thoughts racing. He hadn't expected this defiance, but it stirred something within him, a desire for a challenge that had long been absent. The humans had thrown down the gauntlet, and Laren would see just how far their defiance could take them. On board his ship, Captain Morrow exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The battle was not over, but for the first time, humanity had refused to be treated as prey. They had stood their ground, and now the true test would begin. The calm after the first encounter didn't last long. Admiral Laren, a man of swift decisions and calculated risks, was not one to waste time. While the humans had shown defiance, the Vornak wouldn't allow such insolence to go unchallenged. Yet, for reasons even Laren couldn't fully explain, the idea of overwhelming Earth with the Vornak's full might felt premature. There was something about this young race, something in the fire of Captain Morrow's defiance that intrigued him. The Vornak fleet advanced toward the outer edges of human-controlled space. Their intentions were clear: test humanity's resolve. Laren didn't want an outright conquest, not yet. He wanted to see if this new species, with all their bold talk, could truly back it up. On board the human battlecruiser Dauntless, Captain Morrow stood with his senior officers, reviewing the tactical data streaming in from the forward reconnaissance drones. The Vornak had not retreated. Instead, their ships lingered just beyond the boundaries of human territory, probing their defenses. Morrow had expected as much. The Vornak were a warrior race, an opponent unlike any humanity had faced before. "Sir, they're making no attempt to hide their movements," Commander Ellis, Morrow's second-in-command, remarked, eyeing the display. "They want us to see them coming." Morrow nodded. "They're testing us. They want to know what we're made of." Ellis frowned. "And what are we going to show them?" A smile crept onto Morrow's face, though his eyes remained focused. "That we don't back down." As the Vornak ships edged closer to the boundary, Morrow's plan went into motion. Unbeknownst to Laren, humanity had spent the years since joining the Union preparing for the inevitable. They had studied the tactics of other species, developed new technologies, and above all, learned how to exploit their own underdog position to maximum effect. The first strike came swiftly. A small fleet of human stealth corvettes, barely detectable by Vornak sensors, slipped into the formation of their supply ships. The corvettes moved like shadows, laying mines and sabotaging key systems. The Vornak were caught off guard when several of their auxiliary vessels erupted in fire, sending shock waves through their ranks. Laren, seated in his command chair aboard the Leviathan, watched as reports flooded in. The humans had attacked with precision and skill, crippling the supply line his fleet depended on. For the first time in decades, the Vornak had been outmaneuvered. But instead of fury, Laren felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Finally, an opponent who didn't rely on sheer numbers or strength, but on cunning and ingenuity. He couldn't help but admire the audacity of the human strike. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, "the humans are retreating. They've disappeared from our sensors." "They're not retreating," Laren said, rising from his chair. "They're repositioning. Prepare for a counterattack." Sure enough, the human fleet reappeared moments later, launching a surprise assault from multiple vectors. Morrow had learned from his studies of Vornak tactics that they favored direct confrontations, but humanity thrived in unpredictability. Rather than engaging the Vornak head-on, Morrow had his ship strike quickly and fade back into the void, using guerrilla-style tactics that left the Vornak struggling to respond. Hours passed, with neither side delivering a decisive blow. Morrow's strategy was clear: harass the Vornak, chip away at their strength, and force them into a war of attrition that they weren't accustomed to fighting. Meanwhile, Laren watched and adapted. This wasn't the mindless resistance he was used to from other species. The humans were proving themselves to be a capable and resilient foe, one that valued strategy over brute force. As the skirmishes wore on, Laren found himself not angered by the attacks, but fascinated by them. "They fight like they have nothing to lose," Laren muttered, more to himself than anyone else. And perhaps they don't. The respect between the two leaders was unspoken, but growing. Each maneuver, each countermove, was a conversation in its own right, a dialogue conducted through the language of battle. Laren had expected to crush humanity in a matter of days, but now he found himself studying their tactics, learning from them, and adjusting his own strategies in response. Captain Morrow, too, was beginning to understand his opponent. The Vornak were not the mindless conquerors the Union had made them out to be. They were a disciplined, proud race, bound by a warrior code that valued strength and honor. And while the Vornak possessed overwhelming firepower, they lacked the versatility that humanity had honed through centuries of survival on their war-torn planet. As the hours dragged on, Morrow received a message from the Vornak flagship. The image of Admiral Laren appeared on the Dauntless view screen, his expression more thoughtful than hostile. "You fight well, Captain Morrow," Laren said, his deep voice carrying an undercurrent of respect. "Better than I expected." Morrow crossed his arms, standing tall before the Vornak Admiral. "We're just getting started, Admiral. I hope you didn't think this was going to be easy." Laren allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to cross his lips. "Easy? No. Interesting? Absolutely. But I wonder how long you can keep this up." "As long as it takes," Morrow replied. "We're not going to roll over. If you want our submission, you'll have to earn it." Laren tilted his head slightly, studying the human captain. "Perhaps we will." The communication ended, leaving Morrow with the unmistakable feeling that something had shifted. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a test, a trial by combat that was evolving into something far more significant. For the first time, humanity had not only withstood the might of the Vornak, but had earned their respect. Yet, with respect came greater challenges, and Morrow knew that the true test was still to come. The lull between skirmishes gave both sides time to regroup, but for Captain Morrow, the uneasy quiet felt ominous. He stood at the viewport of the Dauntless, his mind churning. Something didn't add up. The Vornak, for all their military might, were not following the patterns humanity had come to expect. They could have crushed the human fleet by now. Instead, they were engaging with restraint, almost as if they were testing boundaries rather than trying to obliterate them. Morrow's musings were interrupted when Commander Ellis approached, her brow furrowed. "Sir, we've intercepted some unusual communications between the Vornak ships." Morrow turned, intrigued. "Unusual how?" Ellis pulled up the data on a nearby console. "It's heavily encrypted, but our analysts think it's internal. It doesn't look like standard military chatter." Morrow narrowed his eyes at the screen. The Vornak were formidable, but disorganization wasn't their style. Something else was happening within their ranks. "Keep monitoring those channels," he ordered. "I want to know what they're up to." As the Dauntless drifted silently at the edge of human space, Morrow couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle hadn't even begun. On board the Vornak flagship Leviathan, Admiral Laren faced a similar unease. His respect for the humans had only grown, but the subtle currents of unrest within his own fleet were troubling. He knew his warriors, loyal, disciplined, and fierce. But lately, there had been whispers, rumors of dissent. Laren had noticed how some of his officers had grown more guarded in their discussions, their eyes shifting nervously when certain names were mentioned. He stood before his tactical display, watching the human fleet on the screen, but his thoughts were elsewhere. A creeping suspicion gnawed at him. The skirmishes with humanity were almost a distraction from the true threat lurking in the shadows of his empire. A power struggle was brewing within the Vornak leadership, one that threatened not only his command but the entire galaxy. Laren's suspicions were confirmed when his most trusted aide, Commander Jax, approached him quietly in the ship's war room. Jax had been with Laren through countless campaigns, his loyalty unquestionable. But today, his expression was grim. "Admiral," Jax began, his voice low, "I have something you need to see." Laren nodded for him to proceed. Jax activated a secure communication feed, revealing intercepted transmissions from deep within the Vornak Empire. The messages were encrypted, but the meaning was clear. A faction within the Vornak leadership was plotting to overthrow the current regime. They planned to destabilize the fleet from within and use the chaos to launch a coup. Their ultimate goal was not only to seize power, but to enslave both the Vornak and the rest of the galaxy under their control. Laren's eyes darkened as the full weight of the conspiracy settled on him. "This is why the fleet has been behaving strangely," he muttered. "We're being undermined from the inside." Jax nodded. "And it's worse than we thought. They've already infiltrated key positions. If they succeed, the galaxy will fall to their tyranny." For the first time, Laren realized that his battle with humanity had been misjudged. The real threat wasn't the defiance of the humans. It was the cancer within his own ranks. Back on the Dauntless, Moro received an unexpected transmission from the Vornak flagship. Admiral Laren appeared on the screen, his usual cold demeanor softened by something new: urgency. "Captain Moro," Laren began, his voice measured but tense. "We need to talk." Moro raised an eyebrow. "Talk? I thought you wanted to fight." "There is a threat far greater than our conflict," Laren continued. "One that endangers both of our species." Moro leaned forward, intrigued but cautious. "Go on." Laren wasted no time. He explained the internal power struggle within the Vornak and the rise of a faction intent on enslaving the galaxy. Their coup was imminent, and if successful, the Vornak would become unstoppable under their tyrannical rule. But there was more. This faction wasn't interested in honor or strength. They sought domination through fear, an agenda that clashed with the traditional Vornak warrior code. "I've seen enough to know that your people value freedom," Laren said, his voice firm. "As do we. If this faction takes over, they will destroy everything we both stand for." Moro's mind raced. The Vornak, humanity's sworn enemy, were now facing a civil war that could spill over and engulf the galaxy. It was a risk too great to ignore. He knew the Union wouldn't understand, but he didn't need their approval. "And what exactly do you propose, Admiral?" Moro asked. "A temporary alliance," Laren replied. "We combine our forces to eliminate the threat within my empire. Once it's done, we can settle our differences on our terms." Moro considered the offer carefully. Trusting the Vornak wasn't easy, but the stakes were too high. He glanced at Commander Ellis, who gave him a wary but approving nod. "Agreed," Moro said finally. "But don't think for a second that we're doing this for you. We're doing this for our survival." Laren's lips curled into a small smile. "That's all I need." The uneasy alliance between humanity and the Vornak began in the darkness of space, their fleets moving as one toward the heart of the Vornak Empire. Both sides understood the fragility of their truce, but necessity drove them forward. The hidden threat had revealed itself, and only together could they hope to stop it. As they approached their target, Moro couldn't help but wonder if this alliance would outlast the conflict or if, once the dust settled, they would find themselves enemies once again. For now, however, humanity and the Vornak fought side by side, united by the one thing they valued most: freedom. The final battle awaited, but with it came the promise of a new future, one forged in defiance and respect.